How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Found Flicks. On this Ending Explained, we're looking at Azrael, where years after the apocalypse, a devout cult of mute zealots hunt down Azrael, a young woman who escaped her own imprisonment. Genre queen Samara Weaving continuously shows us just how versatile she is as an actress, here in an action-heavy role with no dialogue whatsoever. The whole no-talking gimmick does remind one of A Quiet Place, of course, and there are monsters in the woods here too. But the similarities in there, as Azrael is a lot more action-packed and gore-heavy than I expected. There's some seriously gooey moments on display, and apparently it was done by the same guy behind the special effects of Infinity Pool. Where it struggles a bit is in the overall story that is a bit repetitive at times. There's also a lot of interesting ideas and lore introduced, but with no one talking, we are only given the bare minimum to work with. But that also means there's a lot more to theorize on. So let's check out Azrael, breaking down the story, including what we learn about the apocalypse, just what the burned one creatures are, and explaining the quite ambiguous ending. Just what is she smiling about? A quote at the beginning gives us our only real context to the state of the current world. Many years after the rapture, amongst the survivors, some renounce their sin of speech, as in stopping talking completely. The rapture is, of course, the end times in regards to the Christian faith. Jesus returns to earth, all the dead believers are resurrected, and everyone that believes goes off to heaven, leaving non-believers behind to fester on earth. Presumably, our story takes place after this quite significant event, with people trying to survive in a post-apocalypse environment. In a decaying old church, we focus on a hole in the wall and what looks like blood dripping down. There's a gust of wind and the candle fades away. While we don't ever find out exactly what is in the wall, it is definitely some kind of malevolent presence. A lady, Miriam, appears to lead a group in the woods that worship this being. She adds more strokes to an elaborate mural on the wall, adding a blonde girl amongst a pile of bodies below. As we cut to Azrael, it's obvious that she must be the person depicted in the drawing. Azrael also is a notable character in Christianity, the Angel of Death, in charge of separating souls from their bodies. They are duty-bound to the Lord's will, and all this does fit in with what we see regarding Azrael here. She is constructing a makeshift bracelet and finds some more berries, sewing them on. A twig snaps nearby, instantly putting her on edge, but for now, the coast is clear. We are reminded that no one talks around here, because talking leads to sins. She reunites with her companion Keenan, yet he has a campfire going, which will draw too much attention, and she quickly stamps it out. He is caught off guard, but makes sure to check the trees as well. She gives him an annoyed shove and walks on. He follows after, and even his walking is too loud for her taste. She can't stay strong any longer and breaks down, leaning on him for comfort. She eventually calms down and they go in for a tentative kiss. She gives him the bracelet, placing it on his wrist. Their interlude is dashed when they hear a warbling whistle in the distance. It's followed by another in response, and they know that someone has found them. Keenan wants to lure them away in spite of her hesitation. She sprints further into the woods, stumbling into another guy, and she runs right into the midst of another rough customer, Luther. They rough her up and carry her in tandem. She peers over, seeing Keenan has been captured as well. They stuff him in the back of the car, both silently struggling emotionally out to each other. The lady puts a big blade to his throat, stopping that quick. Azrael gets tossed in the trunk and chained up, Luther giving a triumphant whistle celebrating her capture. She can feel the car start to move and pounds on the trunk, but there is no getting out. At one point, the cars take different roads, meaning Keenan is heading elsewhere. They reach their destination, and she doesn't even have a chance. She's forced back into the woods, with two other people waiting, facing away. There's a bunch of string hung around with various bottles and stuff hanging from it, some kind of warding system. Az is strapped into a stone chair, and she still tries to fight back, shoving Isaac away. Luther grabs her by the neck, seeing what is clearly a crucifix scar on her throat. Another woman, Lizel, is there and approaches Az, both eyeing each other tensely. They must know each other, and we can piece together that Az is from their same group, but now is going to be sacrificed. Lizel pulls out a straight razor and tears deep into her leg, Az doing her best to hold back the pain. They stop when the wind starts to howl and the stuff dangling starts rattling. The others leave Az to fend for herself. They face away and all begin breathing in a rhythmic fashion. Seeing the younger guy also bears the same neck scar, they must be from the same group. And it seems further than they don't talk, but actually can't talk thanks to the branding. Leaves crunch, and there's a glimpse of a black figure shambling through the trees. It really is almost zombie-like in movement, very slow and almost clumsy, at least during the day. The group's breathing gets more intense, and the guy is getting closer, and he must be drawn to her blood. He lets out a guttural yowl, and man, he is certainly taking a sweet time. Isaac turns back, seeing the black thing right there with blood on its lips. She gets her arms free, and he runs to her side, trying to hold her in place. Az reactively swings her arm, impaling him with the sharp chair piece. The boy starts gurgling out, and the monster tackles him, throwing him to the ground. It tears at its throat, taking a healthy chomp, ripping it right out. The others are still busy hooting. Az gets the other restraint broken and gets herself free. Luther spins back to no sign of Az, and the burn dude is dragging Isaac's body away, satisfied for now. There was our first encounter with the creatures known as burned ones. The burned ones are certainly zombie-like and covered in charred, blackened skin. It's almost like there was a massive radiation or something during the apocalypse that gave them this appearance. I'd wager it's something similar but twisted to those who believed and were resurrected. These people who died were brought back as these monsters serving evil. They are drawn to and feed off of blood, and whenever they're about to show up, the wind starts to howl. She keeps moving, but eventually takes a breather at a riverbank. She tries to clean her gash with water from the river and looks beat. She has a fleeting nice memory of smooching Keenan bathed in angelic light. She finds a plant of some sort to keep her leg clean and wraps it up. Preoccupied, she doesn't notice another Bernie traipsing up. It growls and she runs into a stone structure. It stumbles inside, stopping at the opening, sniffing the air. She covers her wound, hoping that it won't smell it. Yeah, it's definitely drawn to blood. Az holds back tears, and it keeps wiggling at the door, but ultimately turns and goes on its merry way. She continues back into the world, coming to a dirt road and some fresh tire tracks. Must be a vehicle nearby. She decides to follow them and comes to another camp, which is surprisingly large, a full-on tent city. We don't know this at this point, but this is actually her group's homestead. The entire perimeter is covered in fence pieces and various branches. Az busts her way in and weaves through the rows of tents. She takes cover and eyes something trembling, an area with handcuffs where they would hold prisoners, then seeing Keenan's bracelet on the ground. Well, he still could be alive then. Liesl arrives at the camp, and she enters into one tent to a quite ill and sickly looking old lady. Must be her mom. She coughs and wheezes, and Liesl gives her a blanket. I'm like, is there some kind of sickness going on out here too, or is she just old as shit? Liesl goes to the same church from the opening, but now full of rows of parishioners. Miriam up front rides around, and the people in the pews wobble along with her. First and foremost, we can see now that Miriam is quite pregnant, also quite surprising. Must be an immaculate conception. We also get a better view of the mural, and it appears to be a baby vomiting up little Satan babies. The wind howls and then goes quiet, Miriam blowing out the candles. She sees Liesl, and the congregation takes off, leaving only the two of them. Miriam is back to her never-ending scribbling on the wall. They stare at each other a moment, and she smacks Liesl upside the head for letting Az escape. There's another drawing of a group of people in cloaks that are standing at the foot of the main one. It sure looks like a bunch of souls there that have been sacrificed, also definitely including Azrael. She is currently just underneath them in the crawl space. Liesl walks outside, and she keeps moving positions to stay off her radar. The wood creaks, and Liesl emerges, crawling towards her like a mad woman. She gets her by the throat, and Az kicks her off, giving her another to grow on. Az scurries out, and there's a bunch more people on the campgrounds now. Liesl sounds the alarm, and others join in. The group start calling out whistles, knowing to be on the lookout. She's spotted by the barrier. Az pushes at one spot, and a guy grabs her foot. She busts loose, and someone takes a shot, just missing her. Wow, lost her again. These guys are kind of bad at this. She runs late into the night, and finally cannot go on anymore. She rests on a rock and leaves some blood behind on the surface. As she moves on, there's a brief shadow scene cresting the boulder. The creature soon spots her, and then another runs right for her. Looks like these guys are a lot more formidable at night. No Walking Dead shuffle now. She outmaneuvers one, causing it to trip over a stump. She seems to outrun them and is blasted by lights. She's nearly run right into by a truck completely covered in lights, which must work to keep the burned ones away. He starts to speak in a foreign language, and this is one of those times where the subtitles don't help at all. Yeah, speaking in foreign language, I can tell. That is the point here, as it's an Esperanto-based language that was more or less made up for the movie. We just as are supposed to have no idea what he's saying, though I did find a few supposed translations online. He is offering her help at least, and she rushes inside his truck. She pounds on the dash, telling him to get a move on. They set off into the dark night, the light dancing eerily over the trees. He keeps chatting her up, and Az simply does not understand, and most likely doesn't know how to speak a language herself at all. He sees a scar on her neck and is curious where she came from. He then puts on the radio, and it looks like she actually hasn't ever heard music before. At first she's confused by the notes, but soon gets into the groove. The whole encounter actually tells us a lot relatively about the current state of the world. We initially think it's just Az and her people left, but now we know that there are other civilizations out there as well, and that importantly they still communicate with language. It makes us wonder about her group's place in the world. Are they just off in the woods in their own little thing, totally separate from everyone else? Kind of seems that way now, but we wouldn't have known that if she hadn't run into this guy. Shockingly, a bullet pierces the windshield and gets him right in the noggin. He slumps over and accelerates wildly out of control. They smash right into the sniper, sending him tumbling over the roof. Az tries to take control, careening right into a wall. She groans back to consciousness, but her new friend is done for. She uneasily exits the car and is wobbly on her feet. Her pace grows becomes more unsteady and she collapses to her knees. Severin is heard coughing, surprisingly still alive. She gets to him first, shoving the gun at its throat. They tussle and a shot goes off, both rolling down a hill. He turns the gun on her, but it is out of bullets. He swings it and hits her in the leg. He gives her another wallop and she returns the favor. She crawls over to the gun and loads the clip. He gets her from behind, trying to choke her out, as kicks her leg to get the gun closer and pulls the trigger, blowing the dude's brains out. She's then back to wandering aimlessly through the woods and comes to another person and campfire. She gets her gun at the ready and slowly approaches. She can't believe to see that it's Keenan and runs to his side, only to trigger a trap, a rope wrapping quickly around her leg and hangs her upside down. We see that Keenan is all beaten up and nailed to the tree. Luther strolls up. Obviously this was his plan and it worked like a charm. He whacks Keenan with the butt of the gun and Az silently screams. The wind suddenly picks up and twigs snap. Luther turns, seeing the limbs starting to rustle, and we know the burned ones are nearby. Az flails wildly, trying to climb up her leg to reach the rope. She can't get a grip and injures her hand even worse. Fresh blood pours out, which will no doubt bring the creatures post-haste. A trio of them descend upon Luther. He attempts to fight back, but is quickly and easily overpowered. They feast upon him and rip his head straight off, drinking from the geyser of his neck hole. Yummy! Keenan regains consciousness and looks up to a helpless Az. It looks like the guys are satisfied with Luther, but not so much. He gives her a weak smile, but it's short-lived. Another guy begins feeding on him, and another quickly ascends a tree after her. Wow, these guys are a much bigger threat at night. Look at them go! Her leg gets stuck over her boot. It grabs her, snarling all up in her face. She gets the rope around its neck and drops down, hanging the critter. She too plummets down, and despite all of her injuries, pushes herself onwards. As she does get her gun back at least. Shame about Keenan though. Now word from this week's sponsor, DraftKings. Buffalo! Everyone's favorite slot game is live on DraftKings Casino! Hit the reels whenever and wherever to play for Wild Western wins. New players can play $5 to get a spin on the mystery wheel for a shot at up to 1,000 in casino credits. Download the app and sign up with code ENDING. Join the stampede with Buffalo on DraftKings Casino now. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. 21 plus, physically present in Connecticut, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia only. Void in Ontario. Eligibility restrictions apply. One per new customer. Play $5 and spin wheel to receive between $10 and $1,000 in non-withdrawable casino credits for select games that expire in 168 hours. Terms at casino.draftkings.com/promos. It's January 19th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Another quote illuminates that our final showdown is coming soon, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and their doom comes swiftly. Az goes back to the camp, several floodlights lighting the area. She whistles a long extended note and waits for a response. The gang hear the call and look out to the woods. The guy looks to Liesel for approval, and he whistles in return. Az moves again and whistles, the group calling for others to lend a hand. They all stroll right past her hiding spot without her being noticed. She slinks through the barrier easily, a few stragglers still outside the tents. She beelines right for the church, ready to end this thing. She slowly creaks the door open, and Miriam is in there as usual, scribbling away. She stomps up to her, and Miriam turns to face her. She places a hand on her belly like, "You can't shoot me, I'm pregnant." She begins to lower her gun, and Miriam attacks her, knocking her unconscious. On the way down, Az scratches at her tummy, getting a little bit of skin, and she's captured again. Maybe one too many times on that happening, getting a bit repetitive. Ah well, one more time. There's flashes of her taken out to a spot in the woods, what looks like a cemetery with cross markers strewn around. The wind picks up, and the crew start their rhythmic breathing. To really make sure the creatures get her, they rub blood all over her face, and then throw her into an empty grave. They cover the top and then fill it with dirt. Thusly, there is no way out, and she's thrust into darkness for a moment as a door raises in front of her, leading to a cave along with a lantern waiting for her. It's like they're giving her another chance at survival for some reason, though it also looks like this is designed specifically to make sure she is sacrificed to the burned ones. Az grabs a lantern and navigates through the craggy corridors. She rounds a corner to the wind whistling, something glimps just ahead. A shadow pops up and a birdie moans towards her, and then really picks up the pace. She flees back through the caverns and then into the coffin, leaving her up against the wall. It snarls all up in her personal space, and she screams hoarsely in return. It gives her a few more curious cursory sniffs. It then goes to her fingers, and remember that she did scratch Miriam's tummy. There's a flash of Miriam, the hole in the wall, and then something burning. It lets out a shrill wheeze and leaves her be. Now we understand that the